Let's talk about all of that, including what we just heard from Senator Tester with Jackie Kucinich, Washington Bureau Chief for the Daily Beast, former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent, and Shan Wu, former federal prosecutor. Congressman Dent, let me begin with you. I mean, hearing, we have a lot of lawmakers on this show, and it was interesting to hear the reaction from Senator Tester, hearing Joni Ernst for the first time. He hadn't heard that before.
Shame on them, he said, yeah.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be the practice of either party. What do you make of it when you hear Senator Ernst's? I mean, if you listen to her, you would think perhaps that Joe Biden's on trial. And this is not an impeachment trial of Joe Biden. It's an impeachment trial of the president, and that was her reaction from a juror. What do you make of it?
Well, she probably shouldn't have said it, but I think it was an honest assessment. How is all of this affecting Joe Biden's campaign? I mean, it's a legitimate question. She probably shouldn't have raised it. I've said all along that the President of the United States essentially weaponized himself. He really weaponized himself to damage Joe Biden's candidacy while simultaneously blowing up his own presidency. And so to a certain extent, I guess that's what Joni Ernst is asking. How much damage has this done to Joe Biden? She shouldn't have asked it, but people are asking that question, people like us who are in the punditry class.
Jackie Kucinich, it was reminiscent to some of Kevin McCarthy's comments on Fox News in 2015 regarding the Benghazi hearings targeting Hillary Clinton. I want to play that sound and get your sense of whether the two have anything in common.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not fought and made that happen.
Good. Are those two sort of letting the inside voice speak on the outside?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the official political term of this is saying the quiet part loud, which is what you heard yesterday. And when you had the Republicans team spend that entire portion about the Bidens justifying why the president thought that there was corruption, and then have a Republican senator go out and say what Joni Ernst said, it really does undermine that entire case. You had another Republican senator, I believe in that same press conference, talk about how the Democrats who are running against Joe Biden were gleefully taking notes and leaning forward. And that wasn't true. I was in the chamber and they were kind of just sitting and watching and they were taking notes, but it wasn't any, with any sort of happiness or anything like that. So while this is a political process, there is some that is definitely out of the lines. And secondly, the other thing that Republican senators have not been able to answer is if this Joe Biden situation with Hunter Biden was so corrupt and so bad, why didn't the Republican Senate investigate it at the time when it was being raised in the New York Times and with all these publications that were cited yesterday? And I haven't heard an answer to that question.
It's a great question, an important one. Also in the president's calls with Poroshenko before Zelensky was in office, before Biden was running, did he bring it up then?
Right.
All right, so Shan, Tuesday morning quarterback for us, if you would, sir. How effective was the argument yesterday, and what does the president's team need to do to close this thing today?
Well, from an advocacy standpoint, the scorecard or report card is very poor for Trump's team. I'd put it down in the C- range. They really did a terrible job with trying to counter the Bolton assertions. Dershowitz, at the end of the presentation, towards the end of prime time, really coming up with, frankly, a bizarre legal theory, which is after he had carefully studied in the intervening years since Clinton the Constitution, he's now concluded that really the impeachment clause should just be read out of the Constitution entirely. It's a very unconvincing type of argument. I think that Sekulow tried to use the minimalist approach, saying we're only going to address things that are in the public record, but of course that's kind of silly because they're the ones stopping it from becoming public. So from an advocacy point of view, not too good. I think the one substantive point Sekulow did make was focusing on the policy issue, saying, look, at the end of the day, this is all about a policy disagreement. It's not an impeachable type of conduct that was done here. I think given the political situation, they probably did enough to give the senators cover, and so today they ought to quickly wrap up and sit down before they wander too far afield.
Charlie, then tell me about the political dangers for Republicans here. You were, of course, a sitting congressman yourself. That one lesson of this, right, is that more information is going to come out, right? I mean, it started with emails from the OMB talking about direction coming from the White House. Lev Parnas, we now have a video of the president saying, remove the ambassador. Now we have the president's former national security advisor, a lifelong Republican, saying that he will testify under oath that the core of the impeachment allegation is true. You have to imagine Republicans would be concerned that, well, if they vote against witnesses, for instance, next week there will be more, and the week after. Is that a serious political danger?
I believe it is. In fact, if I'm a Republican senator right now, I am hopping mad. The one thing these guys don't like, and women, they don't like surprises. The fact that this manuscript had been sitting in the White House since December, and they all just learned about it through the New York Times, is at the very least unsettling. And this will put tremendous pressure on these senators now to support witnesses. You know, before this Bolton revelation, it only appeared there might be 2 Republican votes for witnesses. Well, now, guess what? You know, Pat Toomey puts forward a suggestion of how about negotiating, you know, 1 for 1. Other members are now going to be talking about witnesses. So I think there's going to be tremendous pressure because these members don't want to be surprised again and again and again.
Jackie, how important is it that, yes, you have Susan Collins sounding like she wants witnesses more. Mitt Romney says, I think this Bolton news makes other Republicans get on board with me in calling for witnesses. I get those 2 things. I sort of expected them from them. What I was surprised to hear was Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia go up, shake Dershowitz's hand afterwards, say that he did a good job, and then add that the defense of the president gave, quote, a whole different perspective, and that's what trials are about. So the possibility here that a Democrat votes against witnesses or votes to acquit the president, what do you think?
Witnesses and acquitting the president are 2 different votes, obviously.
Yep.
Most Democrats are saying that they want more information in order to make this decision. But, you know, one of the arguments you're hearing from Republicans and from your kind of sadder Democrats is that this is a foregone conclusion. He's going to be acquitted, so why stretch this out any longer than it has to? And that's some of the arguments you're hearing GOP leadership make, that even if Bolton does testify, even and the White House tries to block him, it's just going to stretch everything out, and they'll end up exactly where they were going to be at the beginning of all of this. Now, does that justify it? That's up to senators.
Yeah, I mean, you have that, Shan Wu, you have that practical argument there, right, saying, listen, the votes are not going to be there no matter what happens. But you heard Dershowitz make a constitutional argument that even if everything Bolton says is true, it's not impeachable. And again, we should note that the evolution of this argument defense that started at it's all not true to now well, even if it is true, it's not impeachable. You're a lawyer. Is that a viable argument?
It's not a very viable argument, and really it shows their sense of the weakening position of the argument, starting out saying it's not untrue. Now, hey, in the alternative, if it is true, it's still not impeachable. So it reflects a weakening of their position, which is really why it's better for them to sit down quickly this morning.
Yeah.
Congressman Dent, what do you make of the Pat Toomey floating of the 1-for-1 deal, witnesses? I mean, our reporting is that's a long shot. That's pretty far away. What do you think?
Well, I think Pat Toomey is right to suggest that maybe we should negotiate witnesses here. That has always been the smarter play. I don't know how many witnesses there should be, but if they're going to be Democratic witnesses, and there should be John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney and Michael Duffy and others, that means, but they're going to be Republican witnesses. So they should negotiate this. So I think Pat Toomey's on to something, and if I were the Republican leadership in the Senate, I would want to negotiate something and try to bring some closure to this witness debate, because there really need to be some.
Okay, quickly before we go, Jackie, Shan, and Charlie, using your political spidey sense, thumbs up or thumbs down, Senate votes to call witnesses with sufficient
You're putting
Republican
them on
votes.
the spot here.
Oh, man, Jim.
He asked, not me.
Thumbs
I'm
up
blaming
says Charlie,
him,
down.
Puppy.
Thumbs down.
You know, no,
Thumbs down says Shan Wu. You're the swing vote, Jackie.
you know, I'm inclined to agree. It's only 2 senators, but man, those are 2 hard votes to get.
So a thumbs up from Jackie.
No, I don't think they will.
Thumbs down.
You don't think they will? Okay,
I don't
fair
think
enough.
they will.
She smartly didn't put it on the screen, so if it turned out not to be true, there's no video record.
Smart mama. Thanks,
I've been
guys.
wrong before.
Jackie,
So
Charlie,
have I.
and Shan, thanks to all of you.
We appreciate it. And thanks all of you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning.